Life can change in an instant. For many wheelchair users, the struggle to push forward is a daily challenge.
After years of development and countless prototypes, we created Rib Grips, the revolutionary wheelchair hand rim covers with built-in ribs for ultimate grip and comfort.
No more slick surfaces, no more heat burns, just pure, reliable grip. Rib Grips, empowering you to push forward with ease. Rib Grips, get a grip on your freedom. Discover the difference. Visit ribgrips.com and use promo code GRIP today.
This is a Rogue Media Network podcast.
Ride hard and I'll make it by dawn. Cross the Brazos and Waco. I'm safe when I reach San Antonio. He glanced back over his shoulder.
All right, welcome back to the Waco History podcast. One of the things we're doing here in this episode is I thought I would bring in one of Baylor University's summer library interns. Sometimes you wonder who writes the entries on Waco History, our Waco History app, or the Waco History website, which is wacohistory.org. Or you can always find Waco History in Google Play or in the App Store. Check it out. If you download it and take a look at it, or if you're a user of Waco History, a long user of Waco History, you can go under Stories and then click Recent, and you will see there the bibliography, the list of Katie Chakmakjian's, I nailed it, entries that she worked on this summer. So you've been working, Katie, since June?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she's been working with on these entries since June. Really a variety of different histories that you got into, right?
Yeah.
So some African-American history in there, some business history, some arts history, some science, history of science, all sorts of things there. So Katie, one thing that people may wonder as they read these is a little bit of your background. And so as we ask in the South, where are you from?
Well, I'm from Waco, so grew up here, spent pretty much my whole life here. So that definitely impacted why I wanted to do this internship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't feel like I knew a whole lot about Waco history before doing this, even though I've grown up here. So it's just a fun way to learn a lot more about the place where I grew up and a place that I really love and call home.
Mm-hmm. So born here?
I was born in Arkansas, but moved here as a baby. So
okay, well that's good to know that you're actually from Arkansas. All right, so moved here, grew up here. Where did you go to school here growing up?
I went to Live Oak for most of my time in school. Started there in third grade. So that's really where I spent the most time.
Okay, really close to Baylor.
Very close.
Yeah. So I'm interested, just because I don't always check on this. I teach history at the college level. I'm kind of wondering, how do you learn about Waco history if you're from Waco? I mean, did you hear it in a class? Did you hear stories about it? How do you learn things about Waco's past?
We learned a few things in school. So I would say probably really the only main things that I knew coming into this were Doris Miller. We talked about that, I think, a little bit in school, or just you kind of learn from passing the memorial and things like that. And then we talked a lot about the Jesse Washington lynching, because that's a really big deal in Waco history. And I remember having some guest speaker come to school that talked about it. But really, we didn't talk a whole lot about Waco specifically at school or elsewhere.
Did you take a Texas history class at some point?
I didn't. At Live Oak, it's a little bit different the way they do it. Probably focuses a little bit more on America and Europe rather than Texas specifically.
Yeah. So this was a little bit of a crash course for you, I guess, right? So you're a Baylor student now. You just finished. You're a sophomore now.
I'm going into my senior year.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my gosh.
That's okay.
How did I get that wrong? You're going into your senior year. You'll graduate next May, right? Okay. And you chose to do a library internship this summer. Why? Why did you want to do? There's a lot of things you can do that junior summer. So why did you decide to do a library internship?
Part of it's just looking at going forward doing history in grad school. I thought it'd be a really good experience. And And some of it is just, it's cool to get your hands a little bit more on kind of some of the archives in the Texas collection, and just actually get to handle some of the physical parts of history that are local to here. And then also I thought writing articles for the Waco History website would be fun. So yeah, that's part of what interested me about this one in particular.
Okay. Yeah. So just so you'll know, Katie did double duty. She, on some days, she was with us in the Institute for Oral History working on Waco history. On other days, she was in the Texas collection, help processing collections and things like that. What sort of work did you do for the Texas collection this summer?
I primarily worked with Jeff Hunt, who's the audio and visual curator. So my first big project for them was organizing all of their panoramic photographs. They have this really big collection of super long, kind of bulky photos that are hard to organize just on a regular basis. So I got this entire classroom and laid all of them out and organized them and updated the listing and added some new photos. And then they had recently received a collection of photo slides from the city of Waco.
Yeah, I heard about this collection. And what period are those photos from? Yeah,
those ones, a lot of them weren't dated, but the ones that were, I think they were mostly from like 60s, 70s to early 2000s. But yeah, so I would pull those out of the slides and start organizing them in boxes.
And what were those? I'm interested in that collection, obviously. What sort of things were in that collection?
There were
like
all
photos
kinds
of what?
Things. Yeah, a lot of photos of downtown area, kind of over time. Some photos of East Waco, some of just neighborhoods and housing. It was all things that were generally related to their like planning services. So some of it was even just their slides from meetings and stuff with graphs and charts and
that sounds
info
fascinating. I'm being sarcastic. Okay, well, interesting. Well, that'll be a fun collection to do some work in at some point. Well, let's jump to Waco history. So had you heard of Waco history before?
No.
No, you never heard of Waco history. So the platform started in 2015. I think when you came on board, we had about 200 entries that have been written on a variety of topics, a lot of African-American history, a lot of business history, women's history. There's a lot of things on there. But we kind of talked about where to start and some things that you wanted to write on first, and maybe some priorities that we had before you came in. So take me through the first couple of entries that you wrote. What did you work on?
So my first two entries were one was about Dr. Monroe Majors, who was the first Black Texan to get a medical degree and to become a doctor here. So obviously he was like a really important pioneer kind of in that field. I thought it was really interesting learning about him. He was from Waco. He kind of hopped around during his professional life, but spent a lot of time in Waco. And then the other entry.
Let's talk about Dr. Majors first, just because it is an amazing story, and I think most people don't know. This is the first African American with a medical degree in Texas. Yes. Dr. Majors also starts a hospital here in town for African Americans. This is during the age of segregation, so blacks did not have access to medical facilities that whites used, and so Dr. Majors was key in creating at least one of those spaces where blacks could go and receive care. One of the things that you point out in the article that I think is interesting is he did move around a lot. Why did he move around a lot? Did you find in your research?
Yeah, he was. Well, some of it is just people didn't like that he was really successful and he was a really prominent member of the community, kind of wherever he went. So a lot of kind of white supremacists would get upset about that, and then also in several places, if like lynchings occurred or racially motivated terrorism, he would speak out against it. And so anywhere where he spoke out against it, he received a lot of backlash and he would receive death threats sometimes. So he basically was forced out of a lot of places. because of that.
Yeah, I would think the Black professional class is pretty small
Yes.
in Waco at this time. And so there would be pressure on them to speak out, but they would be easily identifiable
Yes.
if they did. Yeah. And so I know he left Waco and then he came back to Waco. Where did he move?
Yeah, so he went to medical school at the Meharry Medical College, which I think was in Tennessee. And then he moved back to Texas. He moved to Brenham after that and practiced there for a little bit. Was forced out, went to Calvert, forced out again. He ended up in Los Angeles for a little while. He was welcomed there, and was even invited to lecture at some prestigious medical schools there and that kind of thing. He came back to Waco for about a year. I can't remember exactly what year. I think it was like 1880 or late 80s, early 90s. And he, after only a year, was again like forced out because of those threats. So he ended up in Illinois for a while, kind of went back to California. So he moved around a lot, but after that kind of midpoint in his career when he had been back in Waco, he never came back to Waco after that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chicago, LA, friendlier racial climate at the time. Yeah. You mentioned the medical school. I know there's a picture of the medical school you used in the entry on the app. How do you pick which photos you use? Because I would think with Dr. Majors, one of the challenges might be this is a platform that media is important. So how do you pick what photos you're going to use?
Yeah, so for his, in particular, I had to get a little bit creative. So I found he published a book and there's a photo of him in the front of the book. So I used that for one of the photographs. And then I just had to like search. I used like newspaper clippings for some of them. One of the poems that he published is a picture, and that came from a newspaper clipping. The picture of the medical college, I think, also came from a book. It was like a clipping from a book. But yeah, sometimes I try to find images that are, even if they aren't of the person or place that I'm writing about, things that are somewhat related to their history. So like the medical college or places that were important, or maybe publications that they've put out there. And so sometimes you can find pictures that way. A lot of them are just on the internet, at least for entries that I did. Some of them I found from Texas Collection for other entries.
You mentioned his book. What's his book about? You see, because Baylor has the book.
So the book is called Noted Negro Women, and it's about he basically compiled this encyclopedia almost of Black women from I think throughout history, but a lot of like 18th, 19th century women who he thought were really like important and really had great accomplishments, and he compiled that because he wanted to inspire kind of the next generation of African Americans in general, but specifically women. So that was kind of his goal in publishing that book.
Okay. And you mentioned he's a poet. You put one of his poems. What themes does he explore in his poetry? What did you see in his poetry?
Yeah, the ones that I did find, a lot of them were about race, and about kind of the really extreme hate that he experienced and a lot of other people experienced at the same time. That's one of the things that got him in trouble kind of over and over, was he was publishing stuff that was very clearly like, pushing for equality and just pushing back against like the hate and violence that was constantly that those communities were constantly experiencing. So that's most of what I found.
So you can't see us, but Katie's white. I'm white. It's hard for us necessarily to understand, but you do see in some of that poetry, it must have been a helpful outlet for some of the hatred and oppression that he experienced. It was a way to
for sure.
to turn it into some sort of creative product. But a very inspirational man. Well, the two entries you worked on first, this shows the variety of things that onto something a little bit lighter. The other one you worked on at first was what?
It was about Tony Demarias. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
But
depends on who you ask. I think Demarias is generally, but you hear De Maria as well. I think that may have changed and shifted over time how it's pronounced. But yeah.
Well, yeah. So they were the other article that I first started writing. So they're a barbecue place on Elm Street that's been there for a really long time. I think 70 something years, if I'm remembering correctly. So what do you want to hear about?
Well,
about them?
One thing that is interesting, I think, is, and you can settle this for us because I know Jaspers is also on the Waco History app. What is the relationship between the history of Jaspers and the history of Demarias?
Yeah, so it's the same family. So I think Jasper and Tony were brothers, and Jasper founded his restaurant first, and Tony he had like a small market grocery kind of thing that
it was kind of across the street.
It was really close.
Yeah.
So Jasper's kind of was a restaurant, I think, from the start. But Tony's started as a market grocery, and then eventually they started serving barbecue in their grocery, and it became so popular that eventually they were like, well, we'll just make it a full-time restaurant in I think the 90s. So it's been just a restaurant ever since then.
Yeah, Jasper's over 100 years old now, and I think when Tony's Market started, it was takeaway only, I think, wasn't it? Yeah, and then maybe they added some tables.
Yeah, they kind of slowly added tables, and eventually we're like, well, we'll just full send it.
Well, one of the things that they talk about there is they have an Italian. Obviously, these are Italian immigrants. They came into Houston, right? Originally, I think the parents came into Houston. I
think they came first to New Orleans.
New Orleans,
somewhere else in Texas. Ended up in Waco.
Moved to town, but an Italian family, and so they talk about Italian style barbecue. In your research, did you figure out what Italian style barbecue is? Did you crack the case on that?
I mean, I wouldn't say so, but one of the things that they talk about, at least, that makes it unusual. Both Jaspers and Tony Demarias, they soak their meat in broth first, and then they cook it. So that's pretty unusual, I think, among at least Central Texas barbecue. So that's part of what makes them unique. And they serve it with like a gravy instead of
they both have gravy.
Barbecue sauce.
Yeah. So when you go there and they say, "Do you want gravy?" the answer is always yes. You want gravy. And they're both fantastic barbecue restaurants, if you're hearing this. And they're Waco originals. As the town gets more and more barbecue options, those are two Waco originals, still on Elm Street. So, yeah, worth checking out. Another Elm Street institution that I had you update an entry on that's been on the app a long time is the Jockey Club. So what is the Jockey Club?
Yeah, the Jockey Club is a barbershop that has been around for, I don't remember how long, but a really long time. I think over
100 years. Yeah.
So it's African-American owned, has generally served that community. I think it originally was located in downtown Waco, and then with urban renewal, they ended up moving to Elm Street. But yeah, they're a small local business that's been around for a very long time.
Yeah, recently recognized as a city historic landmark. And you may not know this, but there's some discussion about doing some national kind of landmark status for the Jockey Club, because a really important business. And so, and it continues to be in good hands and operational. And so check out the Jockey Club. I know you just worked on that one a little bit, but I love the Jockey Club. Yeah, originally you can check the entry, but I think it's on 2nd Street in downtown, and then moved across the river. Okay, so that was 2. You kind of put to bed. What did you learn in kind of writing this sort of history? I know you're a good writer, very good
Thank
writer,
you.
good researcher. I wasn't grading you, but good writer, good researcher. But maybe doing this sort of writing, how was that a little bit different?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty different from writing like papers for class because those are going to be generally more argumentative and it's less like you're just telling a fun kind of short story. It's more, a little more scholarly sounding and
Mhm.
definitely more of an argument. So these are more of just telling a story. It's like a short narrative. So I really liked it because part of it just because it's short, so you can get out short articles pretty quickly.
Yeah, my
Which
colleagues in the history department don't assign 700-word
no,
papers.
they don't.
Um, the other thing, it's place based. So if you're
Mhm.
if on your mobile phone, you can see where you are, you can see where this location is. And sometimes we have conversations in the office about where to pin these things on the map. Where did you pin Dr. Majors? Where is his pin place?
Mhm. So it's pinned on his last residence in Waco.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Which was where do you remember?
It was downtown, I think
Yeah.
on 2nd Street or
Yeah.
something like that.
I think that's right. Yeah. Okay. Very interesting. Yeah. And that reminds, sometimes we lose this. There's a large African American presence in downtown Waco
Mhm.
during the period that we're talking about. So, again, the variety comes in. I think you worked on these 2 together.
Mhm.
So, Aline Jeans,
Yes.
you worked on Dr. Jeans, and Waco Civic Theater. Waco Civic Theater, that was inspired. I had a podcast recently with the interim director of Waco Civic Theater, so check that out. But also, they have a centennial. This is their centennial season, I think, that's coming up. What are some things you found out in researching that you found really interesting?
Yeah, I think I just didn't realize how old how
Mhm.
long they've been around. Because, I mean, I've had lots of friends who have participated in Waco Civic Theater
Are you a
productions, and
thespian
not
yourself?
personally, no, but
Well, I heard a little bit in there that at some point you made the stage. Maybe something you experimented with.
oh,
Did you
I
ever
mean, I
like?
I've been in singing at Baylor, but that's not really the same
Okay,
thing.
that is a production.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a production. Okay, good. All right. So that experience helped you write.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I just thought it was fun learning about a place that I've been to, and I've seen lots of their productions before. But yeah, they didn't have a location of their own for a
Mhm.
long time. They were originally the Waco Little Theater, and they existed for about 10 years, like 20s, 30s, before disbanding. And then they kind of reconvened after World War II. And they again kind of hopped around a lot of locations before they eventually built their current location, which won awards and stuff for its
Yeah,
versatility. Which
talk
was
about that,
really
because
cool.
I thought that was extremely interesting.
Yeah.
And folks locally that even know the Civic Theater may not realize how unique that design is of that building.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at that time, Paul Baker, who
Mhm.
was he was the chair of the theater department at Baylor, he was super involved with the Civic Theater, and he worked with a theater architect named James Hull Miller, who I think had won awards before, but they really wanted to design a theater that would be very versatile, because for a civic theater they wanted it to be able to be used for a really wide variety of productions. So it's a space that they wanted this divide between the stage and audience to kind of not have to be there necessarily. So it can, and they can have your typical stage in front, audience sitting kind of behind that, but they can also easily rearrange it so that the the actors and actresses can walk like through the audience and come in from doors, and they originally had like folding chairs, so they could super easily move the chairs around kind of wherever they wanted in whatever formation they wanted. And so this like really unique design ended up winning awards because it was super unique.
And I think not only were the original folding chairs, they kind of look like directors. If you think about a movie set where there's directors' chairs, they kind of look like those chairs.
Yeah. So they intentionally chose. They wanted every audience member to feel like they were really a part of the production. So they're sitting in a director's chair of their own.
One of the things that you did with that, I know, is you pulled kind of oral history. You pulled from some of the oral history collections. On the app, not only their historic images, but we pull from our collections at the Institute for Oral History. We have over 1,000 interviews related to Waco McLennan County history. We talked about what you look for in a photo. What do you look for in kind of an audio clip? I mean, these interviews, some of them are quite long, and you're just using a small piece. So what are you looking for in doing that?
So usually I kind of just start by searching the collections with whatever the article title is, and then it'll bring up parts and transcripts of interviews where that might come up. And so I'll first kind of look through transcripts to see if there's something that looks like it could fit really well. And then if I think it might be a good fit, then I'll listen to that part of the interview, and then if I want to clip it from there, then I can. So that's kind of how I find them.
Okay. And what makes a good audio clip?
I mean, some of it, like, if it talks about a certain aspect of the article or maybe expands on something that I wrote about in a nice way, then that's always good to include. And I think any like people that were involved, so for instance, in the Civic Theater one, I pulled some clips from Margaret Barclay Megaridi, or I don't know how to say her name, but she was the president of the Civic Theater for a while, and she was super involved in Waco Community Junior League, stuff like that. But she just talked about like the fundraising that they did, and that members were really doing all of the work, all the heavy lifting for the Civic Theater, and that kind of thing. So it's fun when people can kind of bring their personal stories that I'm not going to necessarily find elsewhere. They'll talk about those in their interviews, and those are fun things to include.
Okay. So Dr. Majors was a trailblazer. We talked about Dr. Jeans.
Yep, another trailblazer.
Who is Dr. Jeans? Who's Aline Jeans?
Yeah, so she's again from Waco, went to Baylor, but she is a chemist who invented xanthan gum, which is an ingredient that most of us have seen, even if we have no idea what it is. So it's like a thickening agent, or kind of a binding agent that's used in all kinds of products, a lot of gluten-free products, things like ice cream or salad dressing or cough syrup, even like lotions, things like that. So obviously is like a really important ingredient now. So she invented that. And she also invented dextrin, or a way to mass produce dextrin, which she discovered this just before the Korean War started. And dextrin could be used as a blood plasma extender. So they would give it to, they used it to give to soldiers who were bleeding out, who needed to be able to survive long enough to get a transfusion, and it would help them retain enough blood plasma circulating in their body to be able to get a transfusion.
Because of its thickening properties, the way it thickens liquid, right? Yeah. I thought and she, again, that's an invention that we don't know how many lives that saves.
Thousands
on the field in Korea. But it was an interesting story how she discovered the ability to mass produce it. You want to tell that story? Yeah.
So she was doing research at this lab, and a company that produced sodas, they sent the lab a batch of root beer that had gone bad. It had turned really sticky and viscous, and they just could not figure out what had happened. And she discovered that bacteria that produced dextrin had infected the soda. So this was the first time that she discovered that dextrin could be produced in this so widely, because it was really easy to just get the bacteria to make it.
Yeah, this was at I think a USDA ag lab that she worked at for decades.
Yeah, long time.
But yeah, she's in the Inventors Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
I know you included a picture of her meeting JFK.
Mm-hmm.
So she's really recognized in her lifetime for her contributions to science, really important contributions to science that are still paying off. So, I mean, she's fascinating. I think she's a fascinating individual.
Yeah.
Well, the last two, I think I had you work on, and you've got to start preparing for classes. So you can't just be working on Waco history all the time. You're leaving us.
I know.
in Sioux for oral history. The last two you worked on were for Old Main, building at Baylor, and the Earl Harrison House.
Mm-hmm.
Both very old buildings, both with very different histories.
Yes.
Let's start with the oldest. Tell us a little bit about what you learned about the Earl Harrison House.
Yeah, so the Earl Harrison House, it's now located kind of where the Pape Gardens are. And it was originally like in downtown Waco, like kind of closer to where 35 is now.
Mm-hmm.
But it had really fallen.
I think you researched it, and it's where the In and Out.
Yep, it's where In and Out
Those
is
of
now.
you that are in line at the In and Out, that you wouldn't have been there. Yeah.
No, yeah. So it was an antebellum house. So it was built before the Civil War. It has like a Greek revival style, so it's white with these big columns around two sides of the house. It's a really beautiful building, but it actually had fallen into really severe disrepair by the kind of 50s, 60s, and was slated to be demolished to make way for a hotel they were building. And so Nell Pape and her friend Livonia Barnes, they were both women who were very involved in historic preservation in Waco, and they decided they wanted to save this house. So they couldn't have the property, but they had the house dismantled and moved to a new location, which is kind of crazy that house survived, like literally being taken apart and reassembled, but that's what they did. And it's now, back together on like North 5th Street.
Yeah, by the zoo, crossing the zoo. Yeah, threatened by 35, and then I think Roger Conger and others helped save it then, along with Earl Napier Kennard House, which is still across the street. But then threatened again by developers for the hotel that used to sit there, and then they move it. So this is a pre-war, antebellum, no, prebellum. I got to get them confused. Prebellum, I don't do that period. Prebellum residence. So it was built with unfree. It was built with slave labor. Is it the last standing structure, last residence?
I think it's the last standing antebellum structure in Waco, as far as I know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, very important on a lot of different levels. I mean, you can enjoy it from the design aspects of it, and I think it's a venue now for the Historic Waco manages for weddings and that sort of stuff, but also is also a remnant of really that first 10 years of Waco's history, early history as a community. Very interesting. Another structure that you worked on was Old Main, and you looked at it when they just called it Main or Main Building. It was just could be called the Main Building. What were the circumstances surrounding its construction? Yeah,
so it was the first building built on Baylor's campus, the Baylor's Waco campus. So after Baylor moved from Independence to Waco, they combined with Waco University, and they needed a bigger space than Waco University had. So they built Old Main first, and it's a beautiful, beautiful building. It's still like probably one of the most iconic structures on Baylor's campus. But yeah, they used it for just about everything. They used it for classes, chapel, offices. They had a radio station in the top for a while. Clubs would meet there and all kinds of things.
Yeah. So Baylor moves to Waco 1886. They build Old Main.
1887.
One of the things that you point out there that's very much true is the design. What are the ways in which the design of Old Main sets the precedent for what the rest of campus looks like?
Yeah, so it's got the red brick that I feel like most people kind of associate with Baylor's campus.
Yeah.
And it has like some white limestone highlights along the edges by the roof and by the windows, and that's pretty common if you just look out across Baylor's campus, is to have like the red brick with white kind of highlights along edges or things like that. It has the iconic towers, so those have been replicated even in like Dutton Parking Garage.
The Garage Mahal gets a shout out in your entry.
Yeah, it does.
Because they not only put red brick in the accents,
but they put the towers,
put the spires on it. Yeah. It's the most beautiful parking garage I've ever seen. A parking garage has never emotionally moved me, but if you look at that, it's really impressive. But it's funny. You think about design. Now you have the Hurd building there, but it was the corner. Yeah, it was the best. It was this thing you could most easily see, but they fool a lot of passersby that don't necessarily know what's in there. Although it's not just a parking garage, there are other things in there, but it's not as grand a building as it may look from a distance. Every building on Baylor's campus at some point goes through this: do we tear it down? Do we double down and invest in it? When does that kind of happen for Old Main?
So for both Old Main and Burleson, which is right next to it, looks pretty much identical to it. The towers were weakened a lot by the 1953 tornado that came through Waco, and they were worried about the towers falling down and hurting people, and so they removed the towers for a while. But in the 60s, there was a lot of conversation about just demolishing the two structures completely to build a new library for the campus, which was very needed at the time. But there were a lot of people who, felt like the alumni would be really upset, and they felt like that they just needed to preserve kind of the historic tradition of Baylor by keeping Old Main and Burleson around. So they ended up deciding to keep them, and they renovated them in the 70s, and they put matching towers back on. So it looks pretty much the same now as it did, from the beginning. They ended up building Moody Library instead of building one on top of
they tack Draper Academic Building on the back of them, right? To kind of maybe hold them up. I don't know. Anything else you discovered in kind of your Old Main research that you thought was interesting?
I just thought it was fun, like looking through a lot of the pictures, especially because Baylor's digital collections has all kinds of amazing pictures of Old Main. So that was probably my favorite part of this particular entry, was just like seeing all the pictures from over the years, and it looks like, basically the same. It's just the area around it changes so much. Yeah. So that was really fun, just kind of seeing how much Baylor's campus changes, but that building kind of stayed the same, except for when the towers were gone, which looks really weird. But there's a picture on there you can see.
Yeah, you can see. She's got a picture on there of it without it. Yeah, you think of for the city, the suspension bridge being used as kind of an icon of the city. Old Main's definitely that for Baylor's campus. I think used in a lot of circumstances. A lot of aerials of Old Main and sunsets over Old Main and all that sort of stuff. In fact, we can see it from here. We're sitting on the 21st floor of you're not afraid of heights, are you?
No.
Katie? Okay, good. But we can see Old Main from where we're sitting, and still standing strong. So you're from Waco, you worked on Waco history content all summer. If there's one entry that you could do on anything that's not on there, do you have any idea of what you might want to do one on? I'm trying to get you to come back and work for me.
I mean, I feel like I'd have to really comb through a lot of the old entries to make sure I'm not copying something. But I would probably want to do, there's probably already an article on FBC Waco.
There is.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's really fun learning about the churches that have been here for a long time. And
there's so many historic churches.
Yeah.
There's a lot that can be done on there, but they're not all on there, but FBC Waco's on there.
Yeah. So I think it would be fun to just learn about some other like historic churches in the area, just because I really like religious history, and I just think it's kind of fun to look at those buildings, because the buildings are often like really have a lot of historic value and a lot of beauty. But even just learning about the congregations over time is really interesting. Yeah,
you think about what it takes to maintain a historic building, and it takes patrons, and so a congregation in some ways is patrons that are paying. So a lot of our historic buildings, and Dr. Ken Haferteep has written on this. A lot of our historic buildings in town are the old churches that these congregations have taken care of. Okay, so will you come back? I'll let you write on churches. So you teased it a little bit there. So we've got the fall classes. I don't know who you're taking, but you got fall classes, spring classes. You're going to graduate in May. That's the plan.
Yeah.
And then what is next?
Yeah. So right now I'm planning on doing grad school for history.
That's where the money is, Katie. Big bucks. I don't know if we don't do production here, but if we have a cash register like sound drop, if we could drop it in right there, that would be good. All right, so tell me why you would want to do history. Why do you want to do history?
So I really just loved like the classes that I've done, and I think it's super fascinating. And the more I learn about kind of some more niche areas of history that I find really fascinating, like I really like women's history, I really like religious history, like I already said. I just think it's just so fun. Like I think it's really cool. And I really want to, I've kind of always wanted to teach in some capacity, and kind of what exactly that has looked like has changed a lot over time. And I'm still like not 100% sure, but I want to teach history in some way. So yeah, there's also that desire to teach.
Did you like doing research? Do you like doing research?
I like it. Yeah, some. Yeah.
Well, if your parents are listening, it's a great career. It really is a great career. It's not. It may not be as lucrative as some other careers, but it's a fantastic career, because you will never have mastery. You can continue to learn the rest of your life, and that's one of the things I love about what I do. And here with Waco History, I'm continuing to learn just about this place. There's more to learn, and you helped me this summer with some of the research you did. So I want to thank you for your contributions to Waco History and for the things that you authored there. At the bottom of each entry, there's a little bibliographic citation with your name. So you need to copy that and put it in your resume or your CV. All right, good. So I want to thank you for that. I would encourage you, a listener, to check out Waco History, and you can see some of the things that Katie worked on this summer, some really great scholarship, and we look forward to building it out more. There's always more history to tell, and so we're going to work to tell it. So thanks, Katie, for helping us.
Of course. Thank you.
Cross the Brazos and Waco, ride hard, that'll make it by dawn.
Thanks for listening to the Waco History Podcast. Like what you heard? Subscribe, rate, and review our show on iTunes so we can reach more listeners. You can find show notes and info on every episode at wacohistorypodcast.com, and more info on Waco's past at wacohistory.org. Our theme music, used with permission, is Cross the Brazos at Waco, performed by the late Billy Walker. For more info on Billy's music, go to billywalker.com. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time. This has been a Rogue Media Network production. Are you a podcaster? Let's talk podcast hosting. Are you tired of your current podcast host? Need real support in a community that gets it? At Rogue Media Network, we offer top-tier podcast hosting services to help you thrive. From hosting and distribution to dedicated support, we've got you covered. Starting as low as $25 a month. Join our community of passionate podcasters today. Contact us at hello@roguemedianetwork.com.